"You're making a mistake," the man said, his voice terrifyingly calm. It was a career-ending mistake. The officer just laughed, shoving the suspect's head down against the cold metal of the patrol car. He thought he had caught a thug. He thought he had caught a break-in artist lurking in an upscale neighborhood. He didn't look at the badge in the man's pocket. He didn't check the plates on the sedan. The radio didn't chirp with a dispatch code. It screamed with a voice that made the blood freeze in the officer's veins. This wasn't just an arrest. It was the moment the hunter realized he had just handcuffed the wolf. Stay tuned, because when the karma hits, it hits like a freight train. The rain in Oak Haven wasn't the kind that washed things clean. It was the kind that made the grime stick. It was a cold, miserable evening. The sky, a bruised purple, as dusk settled over the well-manicured lawns of the North District. Special Agent Vance Monroe sat in the driver's seat of a charcoal gray Chevy Malibu, the engine off, to conserve fuel and keep his profile low. He wasn't in one of the Bureau's flashier SUVs. He was deep undercover, or at least gray undercover, blending in without a fake persona, just existing in the background where people rarely looked. Vance adjusted the heat vent, though it wasn't blowing. He was a man with the build of someone who spent his mornings boxing and his evenings reading case files. His skin was dark, his eyes sharp and analytical. Currently fixed on the colonial-style house across the street, 420 Elm, the home of Councilman Victor Sterling. Sterling wasn't just a local politician. He was the suspected linchpin in a massive money laundering operation moving through the state's construction contracts. Vance had been building this RICO case. He wasn't here to arrest Sterling, not yet. He was here to see who visited him on an evening before the city budget vote. Vance took a sip of lukewarm coffee from a thermos. "Come on, Victor," Vance whispered to the silence of the car. "Make the call." He was dressed for comfort, not for a press conference. He wore a heavy navy hoodie, dark jeans, and Timberland boots. To the casual observer, he didn't look like the assistant special agent in charge of the Chicago field office. To the untrained eye, he looked like a suspicious male sitting in a car in a neighborhood where the average income hovered around $250,000 a year. And unfortunately for Vance, Officer Derek Sloan had a very untrained eye. A cruiser rolled past slowly. Vance saw it in his rearview mirror. Unit 4 Alpha, Oak Haven PD. He didn't flinch. He didn't duck. He just kept his eyes on the councilman's house. Federal Protocol 101. Don't act guilty, and you won't look guilty. But the cruiser didn't keep going. It braked hard. The reverse lights flared white in the gloom. Vance sighed, his grip on the steering wheel tightening just a fraction. "Don't do it," he muttered. "Just keep driving, officer. You have no idea what you're walking into." The cruiser backed up until it was parallel with Vance's hood. Then the blinding takedown lights flicked on, flooding the interior of the Malibu with harsh white illumination. Vance squinted, shielding his eyes with one hand. He knew the drill. He reached slowly towards the passenger seat, where his credentials lay hidden under a newspaper. "Keep your hands where I can see them." The voice boomed over the cruiser's PA system. Vance froze. He slowly placed both hands on the steering wheel, fingers spread wide. He was a professional. He knew that any sudden movement could be interpreted as a threat, especially by a nervous local cop. He watched in the side mirror as two officers emerged. The driver was a big man, broad shoulders, thick neck, the kind of guy who spent too much time bench pressing and not enough time de-escalating. That was Officer Derek Sloan. His reputation preceded him. Vance had read the local precinct reports as part of his recon. Sloan had 6 excessive force complaints, all dismissed by a friendly internal review board. The passenger was younger, skinnier. Officer Parker Ellis, a rookie barely out of the academy, looking like he was trying to grow a mustache that refused to cooperate. Ellis looked nervous. Sloan looked hungry. Vance rolled down the window as Sloan approached, his hand resting heavily on his holstered Glock. "Good evening, officer," Vance said. His voice was deep, steady, and devoid of fear. Sloan didn't return the greeting. He shined his flashlight directly into Vance's eyes, blinding him. License and registration. Now. It's a rental, Vance said calmly, keeping his hands on the wheel. My identification is in my jacket pocket, and my federal credentials are on the passenger seat under that paper. I'm going to reach for them slowly. Don't you reach for a damn thing, Sloan snapped. Out of the car! Officer, Vance tried again, channeling the authority he used to command task forces. I am a federal agent conducting an active surveillance operation. If you force me out of this vehicle, you're compromising a federal investigation. Sloan let out a short, barking laugh. He looked back at Ellis, who was standing by the rear bumper, hand hovering near his taser. You hear that, Parker? Sloan sneered. We got a federal agent here. Probably Special Agent Hoodie, right? He turned back to Vance, his face hardening. I said get out of the car now, or I drag you out. Vance calculated the odds. If he resisted, Sloan would tase him or shoot him. If he complied, he blew his cover for the Sterling investigation, but he stayed alive. The choice was obvious, but it tasted like bile. I am complying, Vance said. He unbuckled his seatbelt with slow, deliberate movements. He opened the door and stepped out into the rain. He stood taller than Sloan. For a second, the power dynamic shifted just by sheer physical presence. Sloan didn't like that. Turn around, Sloan commanded. Hands on the hood. Spread them. Check my credentials, Sloan, Vance said, using the officer's name intentionally. They are on the seat. Just look at the badge. Shut up. Sloan shoved Vance forward, slamming his chest against the wet metal of the rental car. Vance exhaled sharply as the air left his lungs. He felt Sloan's hands patting him down aggressively, checking the waistband, the pockets. Sloan's hand brushed against the concealed holster at Vance's hip, his service weapon, a Glock 19M. Gun! Sloan screamed. He's got a gun! It is a service weapon, Vance shouted, his voice finally rising. I am FBI. But it was too late. The logic had left the building. Sloan kicked Vance's legs apart, forcing him down to his knees in the mud. Ellis rushed forward, looking terrified. Cuff him! Cuff him now! Sloan roared. Vance felt the cold steel of the handcuffs bite into his wrists. He didn't fight back. He knew that fighting back was a death sentence. Instead, he engaged a different weapon, his mind. He began to memorize everything. The procedure errors, the lack of probable cause, the specific insults Sloan was muttering. You boys have really stepped in it, Vance said, his cheek pressed against the wet asphalt. I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that I gave you a chance. You have the right to remain silent. Sloan spat, yanking Vance up by the handcuffs, sending a searing pain through his shoulders. So use it. As they dragged him toward the cruiser, Vance looked back at the councilman's house. The curtains moved. Councilman Sterling was watching. The operation was blown. Vance Monroe's eyes went cold. He wasn't just an agent anymore. He was a man who had just lost work to a bully with a badge. And now, he was going to destroy that bully's career with the precision of a surgeon. The back of a police interceptor is designed to be uncomfortable. It is a hard plastic shell smelling of old sweat, vomit, and industrial cleaner. Vance sat awkwardly, his hands cuffed behind his back, his knees pressed against the cage divider. In the front seat, the atmosphere was electric, but for the wrong reasons. Sloan was high on adrenaline, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel as he merged back onto the main road. Ellis, the rookie, was sitting in the passenger seat, looking back at Vance through the plexiglass. Sloan, Ellis said softly, maybe we should have checked that ID. He really didn't act like a perp. Don't be a snowflake, Parker. Sloan scoffed, checking his rearview mirror to glare at Vance. Everyone's a lawyer or a fed when they get caught. Guy was sitting outside a councilman's house in a hoodie, probably casing the joint for a robbery. We just saved the neighborhood. Vance leaned forward as much as the cuffs would allow. Officer Ellis, is it? Ellis jumped slightly. Yeah. Check the computer, Vance said. His voice was calm, muffled slightly by the glass. Run the plate of the Malibu. It's a fleet rental registered to the U.S. General Services Administration. Run my name, Vance Monroe. Don't run squat, Sloan ordered. We book him as John Doe if he doesn't have ID on him. Let the desk sergeant sort it out. You left my ID in the car, Vance said, which is a violation of procedure. You also left my vehicle unlocked on a public street with a federal firearm inside. That's a felony, Sloan. Negligence. Sloan slammed on the brakes at a red light, turning around to shout through the glass. You shut your mouth. You're in my world now, pal. You speak when spoken to. You have minutes, Vance said. Sloan frowned. What? We are about minutes from the precinct, Vance analyzed. But my team tracks my vitals via my smartwatch. They know my heart rate just spiked. They know I've stopped moving. They are tracking the GPS of the car. If I don't check in within the next minutes, a distress signal goes out. Minutes after that, the cavalry arrives. Vance paused, letting the silence hang heavy. Minutes, Sloan. That's how long you have to pull over, uncuff me, and pray I don't file charges for assault on a federal officer. Sloan laughed, but it sounded forced this time. You watch too many movies. But Ellis wasn't laughing. The rookie's hands were shaking as he reached for the onboard laptop. He began typing. What are you doing? Sloan snapped. I'm just checking. Ellis's voice cracked. If he's lying, we add impersonating an officer to the charges. It strengthens our case. Sloan grunted, but didn't stop him. The light turned green. The rain hammered against the roof. Vance closed his eyes and began to count the seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. In the front seat, the rhythmic clicking of the keyboard was the only sound. Then silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Sloan, Ellis whispered. What? Sloan, pull over. I'm not pulling over. Derek, pull the car over now. Ellis screamed, his voice pitching up into hysteria. Sloan swerved slightly, startled by the rookie's outburst. What the hell is your problem? Ellis turned the laptop screen towards the driver. Look at the return on the name. Look at the clearance level. It's red, 1 classified. Top secret clearance. Sloan squinted at the screen. The color drained from his face faster than the rain running down the windshield. The screen didn't look like a normal criminal history check. It was flashing a bright red banner. Federal agent, do not detain. Contact SAC, Chicago, immediately. Below that was a photo of Vance Monroe in a suit, looking stern, and his title, Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Organized Crime Division. Oh no, Sloan breathed. Oh no, I told you, came the voice from the back seat. Minutes left. Sloan's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard, his knuckles turned white. It's fake, he stammered. It's got to be a hack. People can hack these things. It's the NCIC database, Derek, Ellis yelled. You can't hack the NCIC from the back of a cop car. We just arrested the head of the FBI's organized crime unit. Uncuff him, Sloan said, his voice trembling. We stop. We let him go. We say it was a misunderstanding. Too late, Vance said. You already called it in. Dispatch knows you have a suspect. If you let me go now without processing, it's kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment. You're already in the quicksand, Sloan. Stop struggling. You'll only sink faster. Sloan panicked. He did the worst thing possible. He doubled down. No, Sloan said, his eyes wild. We bring him in. We find something on him. He had a gun. He was threatening us. We stick to the story. It's his word against ours. Ellis looked at Sloan like he was insane. Are you crazy? He's the FBI. He's a suspect, Sloan roared. And we're the police. We run this town, not the feds. Vance shook his head in the darkness. Minutes, he whispered. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, but it wasn't the bored voice of the dispatcher. It was the chief of police, Chief Ellis Grant. Unit 4. Alpha, this is Chief Grant. What is your location? Over. Sloan grabbed the mic, his hands sweating. Chief, we're southbound on Main, bringing in a 1015, resisting arrest, possession of a concealed weapon. There was a pause on the radio, a pause that lasted an eternity. 4 Alpha, the chief's voice came back, tight and strained. I have the special agent in charge of the Chicago FBI on my personal line. He says, you have one of his men. He says his agent's panic beacon just triggered. Stop the vehicle immediately. Sloan dropped the mic. It dangled from the dashboard by its cord, swinging back and forth like a pendulum. Vance leaned back against the hard plastic seat and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a shark that smells blood in the water. Time's up, Vance said. Blue and red lights erupted in front of them. Not one car, 6 unmarked black SUVs swerved across the median, blocking all lanes of traffic. SWAT trucks mounted the curb. The sky above them began to chop with the sound of a low-flying helicopter. Sloan slammed on the brakes, sending the cruiser into a skid. They came to a halt, surrounded by a wall of federal steel. Open the door, Sloan, Vance commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos, and pray. The intersection of Main Street and 4th Avenue looked less like a rainy suburban road and more like a war zone. The air was vibrating, literally vibrating with the thrum of the helicopter hovering just above the tree line, its spotlight pinning Officer Sloan's cruiser to the asphalt like a bug under a microscope. Inside the cruiser, the silence was deafening, broken only by the hyperventilating breaths of rookie Officer Ellis. What do we do? Ellis squeaked, his hands hovering uselessly over the dashboard. Derek, what do we do? Officer Derek Sloan didn't answer. He was staring through the rain-slicked windshield at the wall of black SUVs. Doors flew open. Men and women in body armor poured out. They didn't move like patrol cops. They moved with fluid, terrifying precision. They carried carbines, not pistols. On the back of their tactical vests, huge yellow letters spelled out the 3 letters Sloan had been praying were a lie. FBI voice boomed from a loudspeaker on the lead SUV. It wasn't the polite warning Sloan had given Vance. It was a command from God. Driver of the police vehicle, throw the keys out the window. Exit the vehicle walking backwards, hands on your head. Do it now. Sloan's ego, inflated by years of bullying locals, suddenly punctured. He looked at the rearview mirror. Vance Monroe was just watching him. The agent wasn't smiling anymore. His expression was one of profound, exhausted disappointment. Open the door, Sloan, Vance said again. Don't make them breach. You won't like the breach. Sloan's hand shook as he rolled down the window. He tossed the keys. They clattered onto the wet road. He opened the door and stepped out into the blinding lights. Walk backwards. The voice screamed. Sloan complied. He felt the rain soaking his uniform, weighing him down. He felt small. For the first time in his career, he felt exactly how every suspect he'd ever harassed felt, helpless. Strong hands grabbed him. He was spun around, slammed against the side of his own cruiser, the exact same way he had slammed Vance minutes earlier. But these hands were professional. They checked him for weapons efficiently, stripping his Glock, his taser, and his backup piece in seconds. Officer Derek Sloan? A voice asked. Sloan looked up. Standing in front of him was a man in a trench coat flanked by 2 tactical operators. This was Special Agent in Charge, Donovan Blake. He looked like a man who ate gravel for breakfast. Yes, Sloan croaked. I am a police officer. I was performing a traffic stop. You are under arrest. Blake interrupted, his voice cutting like a razor. Title 18, Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under color of law, also obstruction of a federal investigation, assault on a federal officer, and kidnapping. Kidnapping? Sloan shouted as the cuffs clicked onto his wrists. I arrested a suspect. You abducted a federal agent, Blake corrected. He leaned in close, his nose inches from Sloan's. You see that man you put in the cage? Blake pointed. 2 agents were carefully helping Vance out of the back seat. They didn't handle him like a criminal. They handled him like a brother. One agent was already using a key to unlock the handcuffs. Another was draping a dry jacket over Vance's shoulders. Vance rubbed his wrists, grimacing. He walked over to where Sloan was being held. The circle of agents parted to let him through. Vance looked at Sloan. He looked at the mud on his own knees. He looked at the rookie, Ellis, who was crying while being zip-tied by another agent near the trunk. "I told you," Vance said softly. "Minutes." You set me up," Sloan spat, trying to salvage some shred of his pride. "You were bait." Vance laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I wasn't bait for you, Sloan. You're not that important. I was hunting a whale. You're just the bottom feeder that swam into the net." Vance turned to Blake. "Donovan, did we get the audio?" Blake tapped his earpiece. "Clear as day. The wire you were wearing picked up everything. The refusal to check ID, the threats, the assault. It's all recorded." Cloud upload finished. Sloan's face went pale. A wire? The hoodie? The suspicious agent? Vance had been wired for sound to record the councilman. Instead, he had recorded the entire illegal arrest. "Get him out of my sight." Vance waved his hand. "And take the rookie in separately." He wanted to check the ID. He might be salvageable as a witness. "You can't do this," Sloan screamed as they dragged him toward a black SUV. "I know the chief. I know the mayor." Vance didn't turn around. He walked to the trunk of the rental car, which the FBI forensics team was already dusting, and retrieved his credentials. He clipped his badge onto his belt. "Donovan," Vance said, looking at the Oak Haven police station down the road. "Change of plans. We aren't going to the field office." "No?" Blake asked. "No." Vance said, his eyes hard. Sloan was too confident. He said, we run this town." He wasn't scared of the consequences. "That tells me this isn't an isolated incident. That tells me the rot goes deeper." Vance looked at the flashing lights of the local precinct in the distance. "We're going to the station," Vance declared. "I want to see who comes to bail him out. We're taking over the precinct." The Oak Haven Police Precinct was usually a quiet place in the evening, but tonight it looked like an anthill that had been kicked over. The lobby was full of suits. FBI agents were seizing computers. A tactical team was guarding the exits. The local cops were standing against the walls, looking confused and terrified, their hands hovering near their belts, but terrified to touch them. Chief of Police Ellis Grant was sweating through his white shirt. He stood in the middle of the bullpen, trying to regain control of his station. "This is unprecedented," Grant shouted at the swarm of agents. "You cannot just waltz in here and commandeer my station. I want to see a warrant." The double doors swung open. The room went silent. Vance Monroe walked in. He was still wearing the muddy jeans and the hoodie, but he walked with the stride of a king. Flanking him were S.A.C. Blake and 4 tactical agents. Vance walked straight up to the chief. He didn't stop until he was in Grant's personal space. "You want a warrant?" Vance asked. He pulled a folded document from his back pocket and slapped it against the chief's chest. "Seizure authorized by a federal judge. We are seizing all dash cam footage, all body cam logs, and all arrest records from the last years." Chief Grant looked at Vance, then at the badge on his belt. He swallowed hard. "Agent Monroe, I look. Sloan is a hothead. We know that. We can handle this internally. There's no need to turn this into a circus." "It's not a circus, Chief," Vance said calmly. "It's a crime scene, and right now this building is the evidence." Vance turned to the holding cells. "Bring me Sloan." Later, Vance sat in the interrogation room. It was the same room where Sloan had intimidated hundreds of suspects. Now, Sloan was cuffed to the table, staring at the two-way mirror. Vance walked in alone. He carried a plastic cup of water and a thick file folder. He sat down opposite Sloan. He didn't speak. He just opened the file and began reading. "Derek Sloan." Vance read aloud. "Decorated officer, 3 commendations for drug busts, 6 complaints for excessive force. And interesting." Vance looked up. "You own a boat, Sloan?" A Sea Ray? Sloan glared. What does that have to do with anything? It's an $80,000 boat, Vance noted, on a salary of 65 grand a year. And you paid cash? Sloan shifted in his seat. I inherited money. Oh, we checked, Vance said. Your parents died broke. You have no inheritance, but you do have a very interesting relationship with Councilman Sterling's construction crews. We found deposits, Sloan, small ones under 10 grand, so they don't flag the IRS, but lots of them. Vance leaned forward. The twist wasn't just the arrest, it was the scope. I wasn't at 420 Elm Street to catch the councilman, Sloan. Vance lied smoothly. He wanted to see Sloan squirm. We already have the councilman. We have him on racketeering. He flipped days ago. This was a bluff. The councilman hadn't flipped yet, but Sloan didn't know that. Sloan's eyes went wide. What? Sterling gave us a list, Vance continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. A list of police officers on his payroll. Officers who look the other way when his trucks move through the city. Officers who harass his political rivals. Officers who arrest suspicious people parked outside his house to keep his meetings secret. Vance slammed his hand on the table. Sloan jumped. You weren't protecting the neighborhood, Vance roared. You were protecting the operation. You saw a car watching your boss, and you tried to scare me off. But you were too stupid to realize I wasn't a rival gang member. You tried to muscle the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I didn't know. Sloan cried. The tough guy facade completely shattering. Sterling told me to keep the street clear on Tuesdays. That's all. He pays me $500 a week just to patrol that block. I didn't know about the laundering. Vance sat back, a satisfied smile touching his lips. He glanced at the mirror. He knew Blake was recording. Sloan had just confessed to corruption. $500 a week? Vance murmured. You threw your life away for $500 a week? I can help you. Sloan pleaded, leaning over the table, rattling the cuffs. I can testify against Sterling. I can give you the others. There's more. Sergeant Donovan, Officer Blaine, they're all in on it. Vance stood up. He walked to the door and knocked twice. You'll testify all right, Vance said. But not for a deal. You'll testify because you have no choice. You're going to federal prison, Sloan, for a long, long time. And do you know what happens to dirty cops in federal prison? Vance opened the door. They become very popular, Vance said coldly. He stepped out into the hallway, where Chief Grant was standing with SAC Blake. The chief looked like he was about to faint. Did you get that? Vance asked. Blake held up a digital recorder, loud and clear. He named Sergeant Donovan and Officer Blaine. We're rounding them up now. Vance turned to the chief. Chief Grant, it seems your department has a systemic infection. I'm afraid I'm going to have to place you under administrative review until we determine if you knew about Sloan's side hustle. I didn't, Grant protested. I swear. Then you have nothing to worry about, Vance said, walking past him. But right now, I have a councilman to visit. And this time, I'm not going to sit in the car. Vance walked towards the exit, the sea of FBI agents parting for him. He was tired. His wrists were bruised and his clothes were muddy. But as he stepped back out into the night rain, he felt lighter. He had gone looking for a white-collar criminal. He had ended up cleaning up a police department. But the night wasn't over. The karma train had one more stop because while Sloan was crying in the interrogation room, the dash cam footage of the arrest was being processed, and Vance knew exactly where it was going to go. The court of public opinion was about to open session. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but the internet moves at the speed of light. While Vance Monroe was busy dismantling the corruption ring within the Oak Haven Police Department, the digital world was about to ignite. It wasn't Vance who leaked the footage. He was too disciplined, too by the book. It was rookie officer Parker Ellis. In a desperate bid to secure immunity and prove he wasn't like his partner, Ellis's attorney had inadvertently allowed the dashcam file to be included in a public records request filed by a local journalist, Theodore Grant. In the morning, the video titled Oak Haven Cop versus FBI Agent, the 7-minute mistake went live. By mid-morning, it had thousands of views. By noon, it had millions. The video was a perfect storm of outrage. The audio was crisp. Viewers watched in horror as Vance, calm and compliant, was bullied, mocked, and assaulted. They heard Sloan's arrogance. They heard the racial slurs muttered under his breath. They heard the chilling line, "We run this town." But the climax, the moment the screen flashed red with the federal clearance warning and Sloan's face crumbled, became the most shared clip on the planet. For Derek Sloan, who had been released on a massive bond pending trial, the real punishment began before he ever stepped foot in a courtroom. He was sitting in his kitchen, staring at a bowl of cereal he couldn't eat when his phone started buzzing. It wasn't a text, it was a deluge, hundreds of notifications per minute. He opened Twitter. His name was trending. Hashtag Derek Sloan is a criminal. Hashtag Fire Derek Sloan. Hashtag 7 minutes. He went to Facebook. His profile was flooded with comments. People from his high school, people he had bullied years ago, strangers from other countries. They were all there. "Remember when you gave me a ticket for going 2 over? Karma's coming. You're a tough guy. Not so tough now, are you?" Sloan threw his phone across the room. It cracked against the wall. He heard a noise outside. He walked to the window and peered through the blinds. There were news vans, 4 of them. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and the local affiliate. A reporter was standing on his lawn, pointing at his front door. "We are live outside the home of the disgraced officer," the reporter was saying. Sloan's wife, Linda, walked into the kitchen. She was dressed in a suit, carrying a suitcase. She looked tired. She looked done. "Where are you going?" Sloan asked, his voice cracking. "My mother's," Linda said. She didn't look at him. "I can't do this, Derek. The threats, the shame. I can't go to the grocery store without people spitting on the ground when they see me. I lost my job at the bank this morning. They said I'm a distraction. You can't leave me," Sloan pleaded. "I'm going to beat this. It was a misunderstanding." Linda stopped at the door. She finally looked at him, and the look was worse than anger. It was pity. "I saw the video, Derek. You weren't a cop. You were a monster, and you were stupid." She walked out. The door slammed. Sloan watched her get into her car, ignoring the reporters shouting questions at her. The hard karma wasn't finished. An hour later, a tow truck backed into his driveway. A large man in coveralls jumped out and started hooking up Sloan's prized possession, the Sea Ray boat. Sloan ran out the front door, forgetting the reporters. Hey, you can't take that?" The repo man didn't stop. He handed Sloan a clipboard. "Bank called the loan. Breach of contract. Plus, the IRS put a freeze on your assets about an hour ago. Something about undeclared income." The cameras flashed. The reporters shouted, "Officer Sloan, do you have a comment on the corruption charges? Officer Sloan, is it true you were working for Councilman Sterling?" Sloan stood there in his sweatpants watching his boat, the symbol of his ill-gotten gains, being dragged away. He was alone. His wife was gone. His career was dead, and the entire world was watching him cry. Meanwhile, across town, Vance Monroe sat in a quiet diner eating a slice of cherry pie. On the TV above the counter, the news was playing the clip of Sloan's arrest. The waitress poured him a refill of coffee. "Can you believe that guy?" she asked, pointing at the screen with the pot, thinking he could bully the FBI.